So this video is going to be a ramble over some clips I got on stream, and I thought some of them were half decent. This will give me a little opportunity to talk about where I'm at with this game and what I'm working on behind the scenes, as well as some personal thoughts on the idea of dedication to an ideal and how that correlates to build construction. I would say making build iterations and playing the PvE to enable those iterations takes up a good 80 to 90% of my time with this game, because I'm obsessive and a perfectionist. But not so much of a perfectionist that I actually follow through half the time. I was really drunk this evening as I was doing these invasions, so the quality of my performance is not the greatest. Not that my play looks much better sober, but I thought I'd include that disclaimer. Also, I'm hoping that it will excuse a few of the Estus cancels you may see. So anyway, this is my 60 plus 6 deprived character that I use to respec into basically any build I could use. It's not perfectly optimal for every possible build, but it does work. It is well-rounded enough, I should say, in order to function with basically any setup. The exception to that being a sorcerer, or most casters, because of the way that attunement falls in line with the stats for the sorcerer starting class. So I've been meaning to bring a sorcerer character that's at least 60 plus 6 up to New Game Plus 2 with all the areas unlocked, and that is a task. So on one of the evenings that I was drunk, it was either later this evening or another evening, I decided that I just really wanted to kill Soul of Cinder. So I took my deprived character and I turned it into a dark build or something. And then I killed Soul of Cinder. And then I, spearheaded my way through the game and I got, all the way past Crystal Sage or something. And then I was like, well, I've just blown all this time. I've just blown all this time making this deprived character New Game Plus 2, and now I still have to do it for the sorcerer if I want to make it perfect that way. So I did end up making the deprived character go all the way through New Game Plus 2 by the time I've made this video, and I have the Sage Ring Plus 2 to use, finally. I was far too lazy and actually kind of afraid of New Game Plus 2 in order to get that. But I overcame my fear, and I triumphed over everything up to the demon princes in the DLC, using a bleed kinda dark hexery setup and summoning gale, and that worked out quite well. And it is ready to go. It's ready to use. It's ready to turn into anything I want it to. Problem is that when you make it a sorcerer, it is just a few points shy of being perfect for that kind of play, which is not the end of the world because it still works. I have tested it. I have done a couple invasions with it to make it work. But for the most part, it's functional. So in terms of perfectionism, that didn't really play out the way I had intended it to. Either way, I now have the Sage Ring Plus 2, that's what matters, and I have a character that I could turn into any build in the game, and it will work. And it will have a decent enough stat spread that it can support whatever playstyle I want. And I think that's important. Maybe someday, sooner or later, I'll go back and I will bring the Sorcerer through New Game Plus and New Game Plus 2, and it'll be horrible, but I'll do it. And then I'll make it absolutely 100% perfect to the necessary specifications. So anyway, dedication. Strength and quality builds are, by their very nature, very strong. It's in the name. This is something you forget when you're trying to make casters work for half a year. And I found that achieving victory even against competent players with a strength-oriented setup like this was very direct, approachable, and simple. Not to say there's no nuance with strength builds, but there's very little obscurity to what strength weapons do well. They have hyper armor through poise, deal great damage, and they've got really big hitboxes. Similar things can be said of quality as your soul level goes above 80, and quality achieves similar AR to heavy infusions. That's not super obscure information, it's just kind of common knowledge. When it comes to dexterity-oriented builds, like you get with a lot of casters, because the decent weapons that convert are usually dexterity, like daggers and rapiers, things like that. They benefit from different skill sets, like rollback stabs and such. Rather than tanking hits or winning by trades, you're looking for more precise openings, maybe to get combos and things like that. And that can sometimes leave you at a stamina disadvantage. It's both easier in terms of how much burst damage you can do, and harder in that you need perseverance to get through multiple attackers, instead of just swinging a greatsword. Dexterity isn't really my specialty. I can't speak on it much, but I've done dexterity-oriented builds before, and they've gone pretty well. I mean, it's dex. What I can speak on is magic, because I feel like I've made more casters, wizards, pyromancers than I could possibly imagine, than anyone could possibly imagine. I usually gravitate around soul level 60 plus 6 because I just kind of like the areas that I can reach with it. And also it's not so early in the game that it feels like twinking too terribly. Not that I don't have a really nice 25 plus 2 sorcerer that I like to use. But I sort of gravitate around 60 plus 6. What I'm thinking about right now is a pyromancer that I can use at various soul levels. But I've been thinking against it just because I feel like I've wrung dry pyromancy, and the way I would play it would be quite bad. I'd probably use things like Floating Chaos, Seething Chaos, and Black Serpent, maybe Profane Flame, and that wouldn't really allow for burst damage considering how easy they are to dodge. And then once I realized how kind of trash it was, I would optimize it to the point where it would lose that spark, and I'd use like Great Combustion and Fire Surge, Black Flame if it's a higher soul level. And there is merit to doing that. I do like having those options. It mirrors the Demon Souls Mage setup in a lot of nice ways, especially when you get a Great Chaos Fire Orb on there, or like Vestiges if you really, really have to do it. But I feel like sorcery has become kind of my thing, and it prevents me from falling into the traps that pyromancy will create in creating extremely simple, extremely strong strategies. And that's where the dedication comes in, because not only is making a sorcerer extremely difficult, but playing as a sorcerer is extremely difficult. You have to sacrifice so much to get decent spell damage, and I said this in my initial wizard video, that you're not really using the spells for damage when you actually run a caster. You have to use them to create openings to use your melee weapons. And that's really just the name of the game with Dark Souls 3. It's not like Dark Souls 1, where you can do a pure caster. It's not like Dark Souls 2. It's not like Demon Souls. The only way you're running a pure caster is if you're somehow getting Vestiges off, like this guy, every time. It's the only way. Anyone can make a pyromancer, and anyone can play as a pyromancer. Invasion pyromancers have a clear path to victory in their spells. It takes a specific type of player to make and use a sorcerer. And it takes a rarer invader still to be a successful sorcerer. There's only a couple I've seen do it, and I myself am not like the greatest invader, especially when it comes to using sorcery. I've seen Sam Maxis do excellent work with sorcery, and we've spoken a little bit about meta sorcerer invasions and things like that. And he really opened my eyes to the power of things like just basic ass Great Soul Arrow, and how good it is especially when you have a co-invader, and some more underrated options like Great Heavy Soul Arrow, how it's basically like a cheap soul spear, and stuff like maxing out your attunement to like 40, so that you have lots of FP to just not burst down, but like plink invaders with. You're doing a lot of damage over a long period of time. Problem is that sometimes those playstyles lack burst damage, and especially when you're using mostly like daggers and rapiers, you're not exactly able to make those big 800 damage gates that you need to close off a phantom. Even into meta, you have to have an extremely specialized build that works with your tools at hand in order to be successful. I love how I'm talking about mostly casters while I'm using the Wing Knight halberd. But yeah, in trying to split your character between a character that can function independently as like an intelligence melee setup and a caster, makes it so that sometimes you're not good at either of those things, and you just end up being a bad wizard and a bad melee character. It's a very, very fine line that you have to sort of straddle as you're putting together your caster. And even when you try to dip too deeply into the wizard side of things, you end up missing out on very necessary stats that you need to survive, like health. And if you dip too deeply into the melee side of things, then you just stop being a caster altogether, pretty much. And then at that point, you might as well just run a strength build, you know? I took this little break from putting together casters to play this strength build because I hadn't done anything else for the longest time, and I just wanted something that was a little brainless. Just a little. Not a lot, but a little. Something I could just bang back shots of vodka to and have a fine time. This comes on the heels of trying to make a very obscure catalyst work in a specific build, and it still is an ongoing, complicated process, but I'm hoping that the end result will be a very artful, very unique kind of meta build that has its own sort of flavor and identity. And hopefully I'll make a video about that if it ever gets done. In the coming days, I'm hoping to show off an optimized sorcerer, pyromancer, and a meta secret build that hopefully is not too terrible. We have to run everything through tests, like for hours before I'm ever satisfied with something. And then there's Demon Souls, which I'm still loving and having a fantastic time with, doing duels and doing invasions with the magic there. And I'm also playing Dark Souls 2, so maybe there'll be an invasion build for that as well. But I'd want to kind of control my soul memory a little bit, and that can be a bit of a process, especially with a caster, which is not how I usually see people make low soul memory builds in that game. Not something like crazy twinked out, but like something that isn't all the way up in the soul memory ranges. Something that's not going to like trigger meta people. I already have meta builds I'm working on in that game, but that's something for another time entirely. So thank you for coming by and listening to me just absolutely go off the rails about meaningless nonsense. And I hope that you have as much fun as I am having with not only this game, but Demon Souls and Bloodborne and whatever it is that you personally enjoy when it comes to invading or really anything. It doesn't particularly matter. Maybe I'll catch you in one of my streams, and if you came from my videos, let me know, and I'll be sure to thank you personally. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a good one.